Welcome into the Saints Insider Podcast for Wednesday, October the 30th. Zach Ewing with Rod Walker, Matthew Paris, and Jeff Duncan on this Wednesday. Saints are 2-6. They've lost 6 in a row. Things look as bleak as they have looked in a long time for this franchise, and that's saying something because there's been some bleak days in the last few years. And so, guys, we started talking about what we want to talk about on this podcast, and I think we kind of realized there's really only one direction people want to hear, and that is...
More Taylor Swift?
Not Taylor Swift. Good guess.
We need the traffic.
Where is the franchise going? And I mean, I think first and foremost, what does that mean for Dennis Allen? Is his job safe? It appears to be for right now. Everybody is saying it is safe. And then bigger picture, what is the future? Where are they going? Because whatever they're doing, Matt, is not working.
It's not, and they are now kind of it's the same situation as last year, but worse. You know, that they've dug themselves into a hole quite again. The hole is deeper this year that they have to climb out of. I think some of the injury situation has been worse than it has been quite recently, but I think that's only, like, if you're a Saints fan, that's even more frustrating because, like, you see it in Mickey Loomis's comments, the coach and Dennis Allen's comments, like, they're pointing to the injuries rather than the games themselves, and maybe it is a legitimate excuse, but that's not what people want to hear, especially when they've been so mediocre for now the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think that's just an excuse, frankly, and it's trying to distract from the bigger picture. We see it go on around the league. It's not just the Saints. So I think fans, I think you could get away with that if you'd had success in the previous years, but they've got no margin for error. They don't get the benefit of the doubt anymore with fans because they've heard those excuses in past years, and they've run out of patience and tolerance for that.
Well, it's not that they're losing, but it's how they're losing. I mean, the defense was supposed to be something you can kind of rely on. You can't even count on the defense. Just giving up too many big plays, and so to me, I think that's part of the problem is that they're not just losing, but they're losing in like every way imaginable.
And badly. Saints Insider is sponsored by Bank Plus. Their banking decisions are actually made here in New Orleans by local bankers who know the community and take the time to know you. From small business to big business, home loans to bank anywhere technology, Bank Plus is here for New Orleans. Learn more at bankplus.net. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to kind of dive into the questions of Dennis Allen's future and why the Saints aren't making a move now and what might eventually drive them to make that move right after this.
Ooh, I see at least 3 of them in there.
3 what?
Possums, big rats, I don't know.
Clarify big.
You're gonna have to gut it.
How much is that gonna cost? Maybe I should just move.
Maybe.
Is that your van?
Hi, strawberry mango. Here you go. Thank you. I'll take another one.
There's no better place to parlay than Caesars Sportsbook. Parlay Builder gives you all the game day action from all across the league. Multiple games, legs, and props, all in one spot. It's so quick and easy, you can keep your focus on the games and your nachos. Or if you're focusing on one game, remember, you can place your same game parlays live during the action. Caesars Sportsbook, the only sportsbook app with Caesars rewards.
All right, so talking about Dennis Allen and his future with the Saints. And, Jeff, I thought you brought up an interesting point talking about it's not just this year. If it was just this year, you could say, okay, they've got the injuries. You know, every team is going to play worse without its starting quarterback pretty much around the league. That's universal. But not only have they not managed to win a single game without the starting quarterback, but they were on a losing streak when Derek Carr got hurt already. And if you look back now, Dennis Allen was below 500 over his first 2 years here. He's now 18-24 with the Saints. You look back at his Raiders years. I know it's not totally fair to use that; those were bad rosters that he had in Oakland. But he's 26-52 overall as a head coach. Like, this is no longer a small sample size either here or overall. So the injury excuse only goes so far, I think.
Well, yeah, I think the last game they got back 4 starters, right? Taysom Hill, Chris Olave, Lucas Patrick. Yeah, four starters. So you're almost full strength except for at quarterback, and you score 6 points offensively. Albeit with a rookie quarterback, but whose fault is that when you're the one that decided to not have a veteran backup? Somebody made that decision, and so that's on the organization. I see the Green Bay Packers win with Malik Willis, who no one thought could win games in the NFL. He was on the team for a week, and they won a game. So it goes on, like you said, around the league. I've covered teams with the Saints that have won with Trevor Siemian at quarterback. That's not an excuse. And I think what's more important is what Rod is saying is it's not – I think if people saw them competing and losing on a field goal at the horn, they've lost 3 games in a row by blowout margins. And I pointed this out in my column this week. It hasn't happened since the Ditka years of 1999. Man, that's a quarter of a century. So I think people have just reached a breaking point right now with the excuses that are coming out of Airline Drive. It just doesn't hold water anymore because they've seen it happen over and over now.
Yeah, I look at this, and the word that comes to mind a little bit when you hear Mickey Loomis talk, and really the only time we hear him talk is on his WWL radio show on Tuesday nights, he seems tone deaf. Jeff, I think you used that term with me yesterday. It's like he's trying to tell everyone not to believe what their eyes are showing them. It's, hey, everything's fine. He had the look beyond the results line a couple weeks ago. Last night he was talking about, I think we're still playing hard. The want to is still there, and everything it's like the end of Animal House. All is calm. Remain calm. All is well. And at some point, that's just going to get old with people. It already has gotten old.
Well, I think the thing that Mickey Loomis has tried to stress in these interviews, I think, is that he makes it clear that he doesn't look at the situation the same as everyone else does. And that's fine when you're winning, but when you're losing, Mickey Loomis, you've covered him longer, Jeff and Rod. My takeaway is that he really stresses patience, that it takes time for players to develop, and no one has patience anymore. But you kind of got to adapt or die with it, too. I mean, I know you can't rush players out there, but, you got to have some insurance, basically, in case the players that you need to step into the spotlight aren't ready to grow. I think kind of the one of the reasons why the Saints haven't been able to withstand these injuries is because the younger players that they have counted on haven't taken that step forward that they've needed to, or they just haven't filled that role. And so it's a roster problem. It's a coaching problem. It's just there's a reason why the national perception about this team was that, they need to hit the hard rebuild button, and that what's the overwhelming return of just rolling it back every year? Well, you're seeing the downside of it now, I think.
And I think Mickey, when I talk about being tone deaf, he keeps referencing that period of time when Sean Payton went 7-9 3 years in a row, and he stuck with him, he said, because he knew he was a good coach. The problem with that comparison is Sean Payton had already won a Super Bowl and gone to the NFC Championship game and demonstrated that he could lead an organization and win. Dennis Allen hasn't done that, and he hasn't even done that at his previous stop either. So there's no demonstrated ability in that head coaching role. And I think he's been patient. He's giving Dennis Allen the first year the latitude to overhaul the defensive staff. He's overhauled the offensive staff. He's brought in his own quarterback. He's given him, as a general manager, a lot of latitude to run the program and get his people in there. And at some point, you got to see results, and we're not seeing it. It actually feels like it's getting worse, not better.
Yeah, I was going to say you can't see any light at the end of this tunnel. It's just it's kind of spinning wheels and stuck in the same place, and I think that's where a lot of this frustration comes from.
It's one thing to say, we look at things differently than everybody else does. Let's say you've lost 5 out of 7 or something, you're going through a tough stretch, and you've been unlucky a couple times, and you're like, look, don't look at the results necessarily. We got guys playing well. They've gotten their ass kicked 4 weeks in a row. I mean, just plain and simple. When was the last time that you actually felt like they had a chance to win a game? I guess briefly against Tampa in the second quarter, you thought, okay, maybe they've made a couple of big plays. They're going to find a way to win this game. But outside of that, it's been 4 straight weeks of just getting torched. And so it's one thing to say, we're not focused on the results. We're focused on the process. The process is leading you to getting crushed out there.
Well, this is also circling back to Dennis Allen. I know we just kind of hammered Mickey Loomis, but circling back to Dennis Allen is that this is now the defense that has fallen apart, and they really haven't had a lot of injuries. Like I think the offense, there are like you can point to that and be like, wow, that's a banged up group. The defense, Pete Werner, who they paid, but he's not an All-Pro. Like you should be able to withstand a prolonged stretch from one of your starting linebackers. Will Harris, safety. The safety play's been bleak after he went down, but again, roster problems because that's why they should have signed Justin Simmons. They knew their safety situation wasn't very good, and I think they're paying the price now. So it's just but with Dennis Allen, the defense just isn't. It hasn't been as effective as years past, and that's his calling card, and that's kind of why.
And in his defense, I think it goes back and forth right between what you said earlier. I mean, it's so many things are wrong, but I think the defense clearly this year has gotten old in certain spots. I think we're seeing that play out. I think it's manifesting itself in missed tackles, yards after catch, a lot of the things that have plagued this defense. And that, again, is on roster building, decision-making, lack of development of the younger players and that they've drafted. There's just a lot of reasons that point to it, but there's no excuse for the defense to be as poor as it is. I mean, I think you would know better than me, Matt, but I think the Chargers came into the game and hadn't scored 20 all year, or something like that.
Their season high was 26, and so they matched it. But the other team they did that against was the Carolina Panthers.
Okay, that speaks to where the Saints are at, who's the only team in the NFC with a worse record than the Saints.
Yeah,
team that they play on Sunday. Okay, so I guess we've accepted that Dennis Allen is safe for now, and DA said the same thing. I think it was last week. He said, "Well, we look at things differently around here." When asked about the future of his job, right? And he said, "We look at things differently around here, and we think things are going okay." And it's like, well, is that somebody just whistling in the dark who's about to get fired? I don't know. The question now becomes, Matt, and you're going to write about this week, and you're doing some research on it.
Yeah.
When would the Saints make the move? Is it definitely going to be at the end of the season? Is there a chance he survives even if they have a bad season? You went back and kind of looked at the history in the last, say, 25 years of the NFL since 2000 of coaches who have a 6-game losing streak and found that, about 50-50 survive?
Yeah, about 50-50. Now, a lot of those people who stay are first-year coaches. I'm still working through the data to see once you're past your first 2 years, do the numbers get worse. It was funny kind of going through that list and seeing kind of the Hall of Fame coaches. Chuck Noll had a 6-game losing streak. Bill Belichick,
you got to chew gum while you say that.
Seeing it, but
not allowed to say that.
It's you can survive a 2-6 start. You can survive a 6-game losing streak, but things have really got to turn around. And, Jeff, you had it in your column. Only 3 teams have made the playoffs after a 2-6 start. You've got to really rally here, and maybe they're capable of doing it, but there's a reason I'm looking into all these numbers. Let's put it that way.
Here's something else that we haven't talked about. There's a couple of factors. One, the Saints haven't fired a coach midseason since 1980, Dick Nolan. And that includes Mike Ditka's final year in 99 when they were 3-13, and Jim Haslett's final year, 2005, when they were 3-13. So the team were even worse, and they waited till after the season. So we see kind of an organizational trend now. Even with the Pelicans, which is the other half of the building, they've waited organizationally to make those changes. The other factor that no one really ever brings up, and that's because coaching salaries are kind of private. They're not as well known. Now, I have yet to be able to validate this, but I think Dennis Allen, I've been told, was making $7 million a year. So previous years, there was no way the Saints were going to walk away and pay Dennis Allen 14. I think I'd heard his contract was 5 years. I'm not 100% sure if it was 4 or 5 years, but they weren't going to walk away and pay him $14 million to not work for them. That's not how they work. They don't do that in the Saints organization. So even if they walked away after this year, if it's a 5-year deal, he's still looking at getting paid millions of dollars to not work for the team, even though it would be offset if he gets a job somewhere else in the league. That matters in this organization. This isn't an organization that just throws money around like that. And I think that might frustrate fans, but it's the reality of how they operate.
So here's a question then, Rod. Let's say we'll give the Saints 4. They get 9 games left, a 4-5 finish, so they finish 6-11. Would they not make a move at that point? Is that within the realm of possibility that they run back Dennis Allen for 2025?
I think you have to make a move. I mean, even going to the season, I think most of us thought this was, this team has to make the playoffs. So I don't even think 8-9 gets it if you're not in the playoffs. So to me, if this isn't a playoff team, and right now they don't look like one, I don't know how you can sell the fans on bringing him back if they don't make the playoffs.
That's the key point, because Jeff always brings this up, is that this fan base this franchise more than any other, depends on season tickets, on tickets every Sunday. They determine that's a key selling point, and I just don't know how. We already saw the interest nosedive before the season started because people weren't really excited about the upcoming season.
Right.
They bought back in on the 2-0 start. They wanted to see if this team was for real, and I think we've seen some declining interest over the last 6 weeks here too.
Yeah, and that's how you sell hope again, right? Is you change things out, but I don't know if that's going to solve it in the big picture, because some of the things we're talking about are really kind of organizationally problematic, and it's bigger than I think. And that one of the things that I think I would say, I don't know if you all would agree with me, but I think the roster has some problems, but if you listen to the guys that have been there a while, Alvin, DeMario, Cam, they've got enough talent to be more competitive than they are.
Right.
Mm-hmm. They're not a 2-6 team. They should be better. I think that's where the players are speaking. You can read between the lines. This isn't a Super Bowl contender, but they should be better than 2-6. So it's bigger than even the players. So yeah, they're talking about having a team meeting. It might solve things for a week or two. They might get everybody rallied and put it together and go on a little streak here, but it won't last because the problems are, I think, organizational and systematic, and I just don't think they can overcome them. We've just seen it happen now for years on end.
If they do go on a streak, what about that streak makes you say, okay, next year we're going to really be good? There's nothing there to make you think that all of a sudden things are going to.
Yeah, if anything, this roster is deteriorating age-wise and injury-wise, and the young guys you don't see a lot of.
I think about what Bill Parcells used to say about, I use this quote a lot in my this quote a lot in my stories because it's true. I mean, he says there's 10 or 12 organizations in the league that are functional and challenge for championships, right? And then there's 20 other ones that are just swimming in circles, can't stay out of their own way. And I feel like that's the case. He said those teams can beat your functional team on a weekly basis. You can lose to them, but they're not going to sustain it. So it reminds me of when I covered Hazlitt. I mean, Hazlitt's teams were like this. They were talented. They would beat the defending Super Bowl champion Rams, the greatest show on turf, and then they'd lose to the Lions the next week. So you can get teased into believing, and that's what's happened here. How many years have we covered this team where everybody gets bought in and they're teased into, oh my gosh, all we needed to do was bring in Clint Kubiak and change the offense. Yeah. And that's going to solve it. There's a magic bullet, and it's more complicated.
Watching the Saints Insider podcast, hit the like button on YouTube for us. Subscribe to the Saints at NOLA.com YouTube channel, and sign up for notifications for any time we go live. We have post-game shows after every Sunday where we show your live comments. Also, Saints Insider podcast twice a week, locker room videos, practice videos, all that good stuff as well. Jeff, you mentioned systemic problems, and one thing you hear people say when they talk about Gayle Benson, the team owner, is, well, doesn't Gayle care? She doesn't, she just sits by. Is she ever going to do anything? Mickey Loomis has to answer for this too. Well, Mickey was actually asked about that on WWL last night, and I found his response to be interesting. He said, "Yes, she's obviously concerned." Was his quote. He says he meets with her almost every single day. That she is involved and she does want to see the team do better. And I guess maybe it sounds obvious, but that's the first I'd heard of that. I mean, it just seems like she's kind of like a figurehead and doesn't pay a lot of attention to wins and losses. So maybe that did need to be said.
Well, I think she definitely is more hands off. I think she empowers her managers and her general managers on both sides of the operation to do their jobs. I think that's the strength of her ownership, is hire good people and let them work. But I think in times like this, fans would like to see her be a little more out front. And that's just not ever been her ownership style. It wasn't Tom Benson's style. He kind of let things go, and then he would address something at the end of the year. I think she's just following the same lead. So I think fans are frustrated by that lack of maybe not transparency, but communication with the fan base from the very top of the organization. Even Mickey Loomis, who doesn't really speak during the season, you have to hear him on a radio show. I think when times like this happens, there's times like this, they'd like to hear more from her. And I think there's something to be said for that.
Yeah, I mean, most NFL owners outside Jerry Jones, like, they don't speak after games. They don't really come out there. Even, like, Dan Snyder is, like, hands-on as he was. He hadn't talked to the media, and, God, I covered the team 7 years, and I met Dan Snyder only once.
Right. That's typical, though, more than...
Yes.
And look, I'd say this. Let me just make one point. I mean, Gail Benson's easy to underestimate. Do not underestimate her. I mean, she's very sharp and very committed to making sure New Orleans has a very good product. I know that for a fact. But she's easy to underestimate because you see her driving around the golf cart at practice, doing the Queen wave, and it's but I mean, she's definitely involved more than I think people think.
This is my question, though, being here now a year, there is that loyalty factor that, the Saints have had a lot of success, but, like, is she going to make those tough decisions? If she has to, not only fire Dennis Allen, but what does she do with Mickey Loomis? Like, if, I think we've talked about, like, maybe Mickey moves to, like, a Rich McKay role with the Falcons, like a team president, but, like, is that going to satisfy people? Like, what's going to happen there, I think is, but right now, I agree.
Early,
yeah, it's too early. I agree with what you're saying.
I mean, I think the organization, in a lot of ways, is run like a family business. Right. In a lot of ways, this is like Dorniaks of the NFL. They're like a family supermarket trying to compete with Kroger and Publix. I mean, it's a bad analogy maybe, but the whole ownership management group has been there for decades. That's very unusual in the NFL. The only team I can think of that's comparable in a lot of ways is the Pittsburgh Steelers. Very much has been a family operation. Rod, you would know this. I mean, that's your team. But the thing is, the Steelers have won, 6 Super Bowls?
They win all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's worked there. The Saints had one run like that, really, of a decade and a half with Sean Payton and Drew Brees. You want to ring the bell? I mentioned Payton, right? and those guys are gone. And I think if you put 2 and 2 together, we're seeing it's not coincidental.
I guess I'm not necessarily saying Gail needs to get out and talk to the media, really, ever. I mean, that's not her role. But fans do want to know, Rod, that she cares, that she is going to make someone answer for the results on the field. And if that's someone, like we've talked about this 100 times for those who don't know, Mickey Loomis is like involved in the ownership of the team, right? Like it's.
Well, I don't know.
He's like listed
involved.
as an heir. Or?
He's executor of the estate.
Okay.
Along with Dennis Lauscher.
So it's very complicated to just get rid of Mickey Loomis. Is my point. You can't just fire him, right? Like a normal team could fire
Mickey
the general
Loomis
manager.
is not going to be fired,
and they wouldn't, right?
No.
It's a family business. They're not going to do it. So the reality would be moving him to an advisory role or a team president role or something like that if you want him to do that.
Or he retires.
Yeah, and that's what people want to see is that Gail has the gumption to go to him and say, "Hey, Mickey, I think it's time."
But then I don't know if, Jeff mentioned the family business. Like then you have to kind of get this outsider to come in. I don't know if this team is going to do that because that's not how they operate.
I think
So-
they promote from within.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So then you're still
And is that
in the same situation.
Yeah,
I mean,
is that
you
going to
just-
satisfy people?
Right.
I mean, I think that's, if you ask me, like, one of the biggest problems they have, one of the strengths the organization have is that this group's been together for a long time. They know the market very well. They understand New Orleans. It's a very unique market. But it's also, I think, one of the blind spots is they don't have outside ideas, people, fresh blood to tell them. They'll argue and say, hey, we go to all the ownership meetings, we go to the meetings, we talk to other teams, but it's different when you're in the building with people. And I think you have to be willing to accept some of those outside ideas.
And I just don't think they're really willing to do that. I think they kind of like, it feels like it's familiar to them. So they like familiarity.
Yeah. I mean, the question is, at what point is their hand forced, and they have to do something? How bad does it have to get? And maybe we'll find out. Maybe we won't. Let's take a break, and when we come back, we got a few. All right, welcome back to the Saints Insider. Trade deadline is Tuesday. It's a day when everyone in America makes big decisions about which direction they want to go. But we're not talking about Election Day. We're talking about
getting into that?
the NFL trade deadline day.
Polarize everybody more.
Okay. Last week, Matt, was it last week? Dennis Allen said the Saints do not expect to be sellers. He doubled down on that a little bit
doubled down on that,
Monday. Do you believe that to be wholly true?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, what are you getting? I think did Mickey Loomis say this, that the returns?
He did say that on WWL again last night.
Even if they had players to trade, the returns haven't been great. So it's like, I mean, Alvin Kamara would have been like one of the only players. I guess Marshawn Lattimore, but if he's hurt, who wants to trade for like a hurt cornerback who's, what players do they have that Chase Young hasn't been productive to actually get like a return? They don't really have anyone that would be like, unless you're parting with like a young piece like Kalante Taylor, but I don't think that makes sense either.
And look, I mean, Dennis Allen's trying to save his job.
Right.
He's not going to sell.
Yep.
You sell when you're like Dave Canales and you're in the first year and you've got backing of ownership. You got a long runway. I mean, that's not the case here.
Yes, the Carolina Panthers, famous for long runways and backing. And
you know what I mean? Somebody's giving him someone gave him the sign off to trade Deontay Johnson, right?
Yes, yeah.
I mean, or Jadeveon Clowney. Like that's not where the Saints are. They're trying to claw their way back into the playoffs somehow. So selling off any of these star players like that doesn't fit into the timeline.
Especially selling off, and you might be getting rid of your coach at the end of the year. I mean, like, that just seems like.
Yeah. And like Matt said, what are you getting? You're getting a 6th-round pick for somebody. I mean, is that worth just giving up on this season and trading a Marshawn Lattimore? I mean, what else do they even sell at this point? Let's see. By the way, this is our transaction segment. It's proudly sponsored by Associated Grocers. Join our team and support the success of local independent retail grocers. Apply today for available positions at Associated Grocers. And then you too could take on Walmart and Albertsons and Publix and take on the big boys like the Saints. Apply for a position at Associated Grocers. Okay, other half of the question. Any chance the Saints are buyers here? They got Marquez Valdez-Scantling last week. He was inactive against the Chargers. We expect maybe to see him play this week. Anything else they're shopping for, Matt? Do you get that sense?
No. I could see like maybe a situation where other teams don't get the return that they want for, like, let's say Mike Williams, and then they end up cutting that player, and maybe they try and scoop someone off the street like that. But no, I don't think so.
What about a veteran back now that Kendre Miller's hurt again? Is that possible or no? I mean, we guess we don't know how.
And they have Jamal Williams.
It's true. I'm just saying.
That's the type of player they'd probably get.
We just saw the Cowboys bring in Dalvin Cook. I mean, I just think that was the only thing I could think of other than a receiver.
I don't know.
There's not going to be any offensive linemen out there that at this stage.
Bring back Andres Pete. Bring him home.
they just kind of seem stuck, Rod. That's what we're talking about from the big picture, but from the small picture for this season, they are what they are, and they're getting healthier, and they have to hope that that's good enough to make a run.
And they're going to have a team meeting to fix all this, so that helps.
The team meeting.
Cynical Rod Walker.
Look, every now and then you see one of these team meetings, like it seems like it works. I don't know if it's actually the team meeting, but things do turn around.
I will say, Alvin Kamara did not say we need to have a team meeting. He said, I want to meet with the leaders and we'll figure out what to do from there. Kind of a key difference. He said, he said, I want to hear from other leaders, like Foster Moreau technically isn't a captain, but I don't know. Does he want to hear what Nick Saldivari has to say about it?
I think what he's saying is he's not a captain.
Yes.
He's got to talk to the team captains, and then they would they would hold the team meeting.
That's fair.
But I think
there is a player's owner. If it hasn't happened already, we're recording this before practice, but it's going to be question number one is, did that meeting happen?
Yeah, and I think those things, I've had a million team meetings covered in my career, and there's lots of times they do work, but I think it's usually kind of a short-term solution.
The longer-term fix could be Derek Carr's health. He's supposed to be back at practice today. He's supposed to be back in action on Sunday. Question number one, guys. Rod, we'll start with you. How big of a difference can Derek Carr make? I mean, when they signed him, they specifically said, hey, Derek, you're not going to be our savior. You don't need to do that. You just need to do your job. They kind of need him to be a savior at this point.
Yeah, but I think the difference between Carr and Rattler and Hainer is pretty substantial. And I think with him, especially against this team they're playing, if you can't win this game with Derek Carr, then, I think they're going to have some conversation.
We'll have another conversation like this next week then.
Emergency pod.
But, the other question, and we did a story on the oblique situation last week. When these guys do come back, okay, so it's not a pain thing, it's a functionality thing. Mm-hmm. So now he can apparently function well enough to throw. Does that mean all the throws? Is he going to be 100%? Is the deep ball going to suffer because you're rotating more? These are the things we don't know.
Yeah. I talked to Dr. Robert Volk. He used to work for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He was saying that as long as he's 100%, there's really no kind of lingering or nagging like you would with the hamstring injury, that you should be able to be full go. Now, if he's not 100%, he said things like throwing on the run, getting outside the pocket, you're using different muscles there when you have to throw on the run than you would normally. He said Carr should be okay in the pocket. It was more the mobility factor.
Which is not really his game anyway.
Right, but they like to do boots and rollouts and stuff that was an important part of how they attacked the Panthers the first time around. So I'll be interested to see there, but I do think the fact that they didn't rush Carr back, he's been doubtful for the last 2 weeks, but they didn't make him an emergency quarterback. It does, to their credit, seem like they're actually taking a patient approach with him. And so if he is back Sunday, I tend to believe that he'd be in good enough health to actually look good.
Yeah, I think they're, at least from what I understand, they want you to come back close to 100% so you don't have that issue again. Yep. And I think you're exactly right. They've waited. I think he probably could have played against the Chargers, but for that very reason, they said, let's just get him back so we have him the rest of the year. They don't want a setback. So I think he'll be fine, and I think I 100% agree with Rod. It's not just, it's the experience you get with Carr, knowing how to manage a game, some of the things that you saw Rattler struggle with, when to just take the check down, when to, just running the offense. It's been really missing since he left. And these next few games are winnable. I think he puts them kind of back over the top there.
You need him to be as close to 100% as possible, because if he's not, and he re-injured himself, this season.
That's all she wrote.
That's it.
Yeah. It's probably anyway, but if you have any hope. And by the way, I kind of told myself we're not talking about the Saints making a run. We're not talking about playoff chances, no matter how slim they may be, unless if they can beat Carolina and they return home and beat Atlanta, then I'm willing to. They're back at 4-6, and then we'll talk about it. That's my minimum to even discuss it. Laying down the law.
I
Okay.
think they're going to do it. Of course, I'm also like one in.
You pick them to win at 17-16 every week. So one of the criticisms last year was that Carr maybe came back too early, and he was poorer in the games after coming back from injury. So that's a point here too. Maybe they thought, let's not do that this year, but they also don't have the veteran backup they did last year.
Right. Well, he also couldn't move this time around.
Maybe they had no choice.
And but yeah, I looked up those numbers for that oblique story. He had a 76 passer rating coming off an injury, and in 2 of those 3 games he was awful. Third game was kind of okay before.
Well, they were playing Carolina, I think, in the third game.
And I think
yes.
I might be wrong about this, but I think Carolina's, if they're not last in the league, they're at the very bottom in run defense. I think they ran all over them in the opener, and now they don't even have Derek Brown. So to me, it's pretty clear. This is a perfect game for him to come back, get the running game going. They showed flashes of it, but the problem was they were getting a lot of penalties early on. Dennis Allen pointed that out. When we watched the game, there were so many times they were in 2nd and 20, 2nd and 19. They cannot afford that. This offense isn't good enough to overcome that. So if they can get ahead of the chains, then Carr can kind of just manage, I think, the offense.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's going to do it for today's podcast. We'll be back Friday to preview that. Can you guys believe they didn't flex the game to Sunday night?
Stunned.
Saints-Panthers on Sunday. They flexed Vikings-Colts instead. I couldn't.
They should send them to London and make them play at 8 in the morning.
They're just going to bring him to Germany. Panthers go a week early.
The Munich game is Panthers-Giants next year.
Oh, God.
Who's getting up early for that?
They'll be singing Sweet Carolina in the crowd, man, early in that one to get the fans going.
Yeah. Well, we got Saints-Panthers on Sunday, and we made fun of the team's combined record and all that, and we will, but this is absolutely 100% a must-win game for the Saints. I mean, it is an important game. If they're going to do anything, they absolutely must win this game.
Yeah.
And if they don't, it goes the other direction, as you were saying, Rod, where now we have to kind of rush those conversations about the future.
Yeah, because you come back to an empty dome when they play the Falcons. If they lose this one, and it might be half empty.
It may be empty anyway.
Yeah. So got to win this one.
Yeah. All right. So we'll talk about it Friday. That is the Saints Insider podcast for today. If you enjoyed the show, hit the like button for us. Leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and share the video with your friends. We appreciate it. For Norman Bell, our producer, videographer, audio guy, Mr. Do-It-All, Norman Bell, thank him. And for Rod Walker, Matthew Paris, and Jeff Duncan, I'm Zach Ewing. Thanks for watching the Saints Insider.